Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our informational webinar on year 2 of the Community Accelerator Grant, a statewide grant program funded by the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation and intended to provide essential capital for Washington State's arts and cultural organizations. My name is Ellen Milligan, and I am the VP of Grant Making at ArtsFund. I am a white woman with long, shoulder-length dark hair, wearing a black V-neck sweater and sitting in front of a virtual background that says Community Accelerator Grant. As we begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge that the city of Seattle, where ArtsFund is based, is on the occupied lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the ancestral lands of the Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish tribes, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I would also like to acknowledge that many with us today are on different territories, and we join you in honoring and recognizing those as well. To make today's event more accessible, we have a number of accessibility features. We are joined by 2 ASL interpreters who will be spotlit throughout the program. You can enable automatically generated captions by clicking on the closed caption/live transcript button in the meeting control bar, then clicking Enable Auto Transcription. You can click and drag the provided subtitles to move their position on the screen. You can also click on the small arrow to the right of the live transcript button to adjust your subtitle settings or to open the full transcript at any time. Please be aware that the subtitles will not be 100% accurate as they are automatically generated. We will be sharing a professionally captioned recording of this webinar on our website within the next several days. Each of our speakers will also visually describe themselves the first time they speak, as I did at the top of the program. In just a few moments, you'll be hearing from Michael Greer, ArtsFund's president and CEO, who will provide an overview of the Community Accelerator Grant program. Today's webinar is intended to provide clarity around eligibility for the program and to offer insight into the application process, including updates made from last year's granting cycle. We will walk you through the application portal and then hold a brief question and answer session. We have also put together a webpage of frequently asked questions, which is available on the program's website at artsfund.org/accelerator. We highly encourage all applicants to review the FAQ page before submitting your applications. Before we move on, we'd love to collect some information about who's here today and where you're joining us from. You should now see a link on screen and in a moment in the chat to a brief anonymous demographic survey. While completing the survey is completely optional, your information will help us get a sense of whether we've successfully reached the populations this funding is intended to serve and where we need to do more outreach. We'll take a few moments, probably about 30 seconds, for you to visit that link and complete the survey now. Thank you. And without further ado, here is Michael.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Greer, and I am the president and CEO here at ArtsFund. I am a light-skinned black male with no hair, wearing some black chunky rimmed glasses, a kind of mustardish turtleneck, and sitting in front of the same blue background that Ellen was sitting in front of with Community Accelerator Grant on the back. I want to thank everyone to begin with for taking the time to complete the survey, and also just for joining us today. ArtsFund is incredibly excited to again be working with the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation in order to distribute $10 million across the entire state of Washington to arts and cultural organizations. We know that your organizations continue to face unique challenges. And after having spent the last several years watching your creativity, your resilience, your innovation, we are thrilled to have the opportunity to meaningfully invest in the recovery of your organizations. ArtsFund believes that the arts create a better quality of life for everybody. And that cultural density in a community, it supports the health and well-being of everybody who lives there. This grant program is intended to bolster the arts in all corners of Washington state, and especially in communities that have traditionally been the furthest away from large-scale philanthropy. These funds are unrestricted, and they're unrestricted because you're the experts in what you do. Our goal is to boost your ability to invest in your missions and the communities that you serve in whatever ways you know are most impactful. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and I'm going to pass it back over to Ellen, who's going to talk you through the eligibility parameters. Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks, Michael. Let's get into the details of the program. The Community Accelerator Grant is intended for arts and cultural organizations in Washington state. We want to support a wide variety of groups, but we also want to make it as easy as possible for organizations to understand if this grant program is intended for them. In order to be eligible, groups must meet the following key requirements, which you'll see up here on this slide. First, your organization must be based in Washington. Your organization's primary mission must be to produce or support arts and cultural activities, and we'll talk more about that just in a moment. Your organization must have existed for 3 or more years. Over the last 3 fiscal years, including the one you're currently in, you must have an average annual operating budget of at least $25,000. We're asking you to calculate this number by adding your total revenue from your last 2 fiscal years to your budgeted revenue from your current fiscal year and dividing that number by 3. Your budget does not have to exceed $25,000 in each of these 3 years, but the average size must be at or above $25,000. If you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, this budget requirement applies to your organization, not your fiscal sponsor. Finally, you must meet one of these 3 conditions. You must be a 501c3 public charity. You must be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 public charity, or you must be a federally or state recognized tribal entity. I do want to note here that the most significant clarification we've made from last year's eligibility parameters is around tribes. As cultural and artistic practices are embedded in the work and daily life of tribes, tribes will be considered eligible regardless of whether they have a formal mission statement encompassing arts and cultural activities. Additionally, tribal entities focused on artistic and cultural activities, such as culture departments, tribal museums, are eligible to apply if they meet the minimum budget requirements. Multiple entities affiliated with the same tribe may apply if each meets the eligibility criteria. And again, there are links to the FAQ in our chat if you want to see any further detail on any of this. Last year, most of the questions we received about eligibility were about how we were defining arts and cultural organizations. So I'd like to take just a couple minutes to speak to that question. If your organization's primary mission is to produce or support arts and cultural activities, you are eligible for this grant. If your organization's primary mission is something like conducting historical research, running a fair, or organizing a volunteer corps, and supporting arts and cultural activities is something you do as well, that's of course enormously valuable work, but it puts you outside the funding scope of this program. If you're a cultural organization, in order to be eligible, your work must contain a significant artistic component. As an example, let's consider 2 hypothetical organizations. The first uplifts Mexican American and Latinx culture. They do this by providing workshops, seminars, and presentations in schools about Latinx identity and history. This is a cultural organization, but their work does not contain its significant artistic component, so they would not be eligible. The second organization also uplifts Mexican American and Latinx culture, but the way they do their work is through participating in festivals and through teaching and practicing traditional dance, music, and costuming. Because they have a significant artistic component to their work, this organization would be eligible. There's now a lawnmower outside my window, and I hope none of you can hear that. Current ArtsFund grantees are welcome to apply if they meet the requirements of this program, and organizations that received Community Accelerator Grant funding last year are welcome to apply again, though neither are automatic guarantees of eligibility or funding in year 2. Likewise, if your organization was determined ineligible last year, that does not mean you are automatically disqualified this year. Though, as you will note, the eligibility parameters of this year's granting process are very similar to last year's. If you still have questions about whether your group is eligible, there are many ways to get more information. You can ask broader questions here in this webinar using the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get to your questions in the second half of the hour. You can review the FAQ page on artsfund.org/accelerator. If you have specific questions related to your organization's eligibility or process, you can email us at accelerator@artsfund.org or call our new Accelerator specific phone line at 206-210-4670 to speak with a member of the grant-making team or leave a voicemail. You can see the hours displayed on this slide. Starting on January 29th, the phone line will be staffed on Mondays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and on Tuesdays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And now I will pass things over to our grants coordinator, Max Rosen, who will be presenting on our application and the application portal.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Rosen. I'm the grants coordinator at ArtsFund. I'm a white mask presenting person. I have an orange and brown mullet, and I'm wearing brown and silver glasses, as well as a black shirt and a silver necklace. The same blue background with Community Accelerator Grant is behind me. We're about to walk through the Community Accelerator Grant application portal. Before we get started, I want to note this is a preview of the portal. The application portal will not open until February 5th at noon Pacific time. At that time, we will send out an email and post a link to artsfund.org/accelerator. We've shared a PDF of the application on our website, so you can preview questions in advance, but you cannot create a profile or begin your application until the portal opens on February 5th. So I'm now going to share my screen to show you what the application portal will look like. Great. So when I open the link to the portal, the first page that will appear will be the login page. Just wait for some sirens to pass. Great. So if you are a new applicant to an ArtsFund grant, you'll follow the instructions to sign up for credentials. If you have applied for a grant through ArtsFund before, you can use your existing login credentials. Once you create a login, you can revisit the portal as many times as needed. I'm going to scroll down on this login page and use my existing credentials. Once I've pressed the login button, I'll be brought to the homepage of the Community Accelerator Grant portal. There is some text about the fund that's similar to what is on our website, a link to the Community Accelerator Grant webpage, as well as a link to the Community Accelerator Grant FAQ and instructions on how to apply. I'm going to scroll down on this page. When the application portal opens, we will also include links to translated application questions in 7 languages. These application questions will also be available on our website in 7 languages as well in PDF form. So at the bottom of this page, you'll see a text saying create an eligibility profile to get started. I'll click the white box with blue text that says create an eligibility profile to get started to begin my first step of my application, the eligibility profile. This brings me to the eligibility profile form, which we can now see on my screen. Sorry, there's a lot of sirens here. All right, so this eligibility form will allow you to find out if you meet the minimum eligibility requirements for the Community Accelerator Grant. If you answer no to any of the questions on this form, you will see a message displayed that tells you you're ineligible and you will not be able to fill out an actual application. So I'm going to enter in my organization name. Let's say I am a music organization. Great. So after I enter in my organization name, assuming that I can answer yes to all of these questions, each question will then propagate on the form. So I'll just scroll down and go through to show you what that looks like, assuming I'm eligible for the organization requirements, budget requirements, and producing arts and culture activities. We ask you to mention or to select your eligibility if you are primarily focused on producing or supporting arts and culture activities, as Ellen mentioned before. We include this optional comment box for you to provide more information to explain how your organization focuses on arts and culture activities. This is optional again, and it will not be scored. So once I've finished creating my profile, I'll press the blue Create Profile button on the bottom right of the screen. This takes me back to the application homepage. I'll scroll down again, and I'll now be able to view a white box with a blue plus sign that says Get Started. I'll click that box. And I'm now brought to the application process screen, where you'll be able to see 4 forms that compose the Community Accelerator Grant application. When you're filling out your application, you can complete these forms in any order, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to begin with the general contact information. And I want to mention, you do not have to complete your application in one sitting. You can revisit each of these forms by saving them as a draft and submit over time, and just be sure to submit before the deadline. So I'm going to press the blue open button next to the general contact information form. This brings me to the general contact information form. I'm going to scroll down so we can view the form. The organization name that I had entered on my eligibility profile automatically populates into this form. The first question on the general information form asks you to select the statement that applies to your organization about your organization type. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to say that my organization is fiscally sponsored by another organization, 501c3 status. I then see the option to upload my organization's fiscal sponsorship agreement in PDF format. I'll scroll down. We ask for information on your address and your EIN number. This should be completed for your organization, not your fiscal sponsor's organization. I'll scroll a bit more down to contact information. Here, we ask you to provide a primary contact. This is the person that ArtsFund will contact if we have any questions or requested revisions for your application. And again, because we're filling out this form as a fiscally sponsored organization, the fiscal sponsor information field will show on this form. This is where you should include information about your fiscal sponsor's organization, as well as a contact for that fiscal sponsor organization. So I'll scroll down to the end of this form here. The last part is focus area. This is important because it helps us understand how your organization fits into the arts and culture sector. There's a drop-down menu here that allows you to select your organization's primary focus. So I'll just give a second for folks to view the options. There is an option for other. If you feel that your primary focus area is not covered by one of the listed options, but you do meet the requirement of being an arts and culture organization, you can select other. That will then populate a text box where you'll have up to 25 words to describe. And again, if you select other, that text box will be required. We also ask for a secondary focus area. This is not a required question, but if you feel that applies to your organization, you may respond there as well. So I will save my draft of this form. Great. And I'll take a second to mention the Mark Complete button on the bottom of this form is you're able to only use it if you complete all required areas. Because we haven't, I'll close this form out after saving my draft. This brings me to the financial and back to the application process homepage, where I'll be able to see those 4 forms that make up the application. Next, we'll walk through the financial information form. So I'll press that blue open button on the right-hand side of the financial information form. And we can now see the financial information form questions in front of us. We ask you to upload a PDF file of your organization's most recent Form 990 or 990EZ. If you are not able to provide a 990, we ask that you upload your most recent financial documents. This should include an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flow. The first question on this form asks you what type of financial document you're uploading. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'll say I'm uploading fiscal year 2023 financial documents. Then can upload those 3 documents as one PDF, or you may upload each document, the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flow separately. If you do choose to upload documents separately, please make sure to label them appropriately. I want to mention that last year we accepted 990 forms as well as 990EZ. We are no longer able to accept 990N forms. So if you most recently used that form to file with the IRS, please instead upload financial documents. So that's the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flow. I'll scroll down on the financial information form, and we provide a few definitions to help you fill out this form. I'll take a moment to just mention about personal expenses. So here, if your organization has paid staff, we ask you to enter your personnel expenses for all 3 years. Personnel expenses are part of operating expenses, but we ask for this line item separately for research and advocacy purposes, and your response will not be scored. So I'll scroll a bit further down. The bulk of this form asks you about your total operating expenses and your total revenue for fiscal years 2022, 2023, and your budgeted fiscal year 2024. All of these fields are required. So if you do not have a number to enter, please enter 0 instead of leaving a field blank. I'll scroll down to the end of this form. The last 3 questions on the financial information form ask you to complete or provide us data to help us understand the potential impact the Community Accelerator Grant will have on Washington State's arts and culture sector. Your responses to the following questions will not be scored and do not have an impact on your final award. I'll take a moment just to go through the last question on this form. Our last question here asked you to quantify by how much you anticipate increasing your revenue from this grant, not including the amount of the grant award. A few examples of how you might do that would be using this grant as evidence of your organization's credibility in other grant applications, asking for larger grants, asking for unrestricted grants, and diversifying your funding sources. We understand that your response will be an estimate and it will have no impact on your award. Great. So I'll save a draft of my financial information form and I'll close it out. I'm now brought back to the application process page. I'll scroll down and we'll walk through the program and demographics information form. I'll press that blue open button. And I'm brought to the programs and demographic form questions. So I want to note that the data being collected in this form is so that we can ensure grant funds are equitably distributed across Washington State's arts and culture sector, particularly to organizations who center the voices of people who identify as BIPOC, as LGBTQ+, and as people with disabilities. You can learn more about how the data you share in this form will be used, shared, and stored in our data use statement. It's linked here at the top of this form. We're also going to share a link to the data use statement in the chat, and you can access it on the Community Accelerator Grant webpage. So I want to take a moment just to go through one part of the data use statement before we go through the rest of this form. And this part explains how the data that you provide in this form will be used to determine awards. The demographic data you provide as part of your Community Accelerator Grant application will be reviewed by ArtsFund staff. The data will then be anonymized across applicants and shared with our community advisory panel. You can view who is part of the panel on our website. If you choose to provide demographic data in this form, it will be factored into your organization's award consideration. If you choose to answer demographic data questions with "do not know," "prefer not to answer," "not applicable," you will not be penalized, but the benefits of demographic representation will not be factored into your award consideration. Great. So we also provide a few definitions throughout this form to help you filling out or completing the form. I'll read through the first definition we provide, which is about centering. So here we mean centering indicates that these people's voices, the center populations that I mentioned above, are not just included or invited to participate in an organization's programming, but are the focus of an organization's work. People from center populations are telling their own stories, and programming is intended to be culturally relevant to their experiences. So we'll just go through the first statement here as an example. Our organization creates and or provides programming centering LGBTQ+ communities. We ask you to respond to the statement on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being strongly disagree with that statement, or 5 being strongly agree. I'll scroll down to the middle of this form, where we ask you to provide demographic information on behalf of your organization's staff. So the first part of this demographic section asks you about the number of paid staff at your organization. If your organization has 2 or more paid staff, I'll select my organization has 2+ paid staff on payroll. For organizations with 2 or more paid staff, please include all staff on payroll. So those are folks who are paid by wages or salaries, not by stipends or contract income. If your organization has 0 to 1 paid staff, select my organization has 0 to 1 paid staff on payroll or is volunteer run. For organizations with only 1 paid staff member or no paid staff members who work with a dedicated core group of volunteers, please complete this demographic survey on behalf of that 1 staff member and the core group of volunteers. So I'll scroll down a bit. Please note that all fields in this form are required and enter a 0 instead of leaving a field blank. Also, provide head counts for each group. Use whole numbers and no symbols. So we asked for how many total staff members your organization had last year and your organization has currently. Again, if you're volunteer run, please fill out this form on behalf of that core group of volunteers. I'll scroll down a bit more. The first part of this demographic section asks about the racial identities of your staff. I want to note that we understand racial identities are complex, deeply personal, and intersecting. If more than one identity applies, we encourage you to select 2 or more races. If an identity is not represented, we suggest you select some other race alone. We encourage you to share further clarification in the comment box provided if desired. So I'll scroll down a bit, and we ask for prior and current year again in this table. And as a reminder, all fields are required. So put 0s instead of leaving a field blank. I'll scroll down a bit more. And we'll just mention there is a total calculation here at the end of the table. This should match the headcount that you provide above for total staff currently and in the previous year. I'll scroll down a bit more on this form. We then ask you to provide demographic information for the number of your staff who identify as LGBTQ+. The last, I'll scroll down a bit more. And the last table here asks for the number of your staff who identify as having a disability. I'll scroll down to the bottom of this form where the last section asks about if your organization has a board or governing advisory body. If your organization does have a board or governing advisory body, I'll select yes to this question. The same questions that we asked about your staff demographics will then populate for you to complete demographic information on behalf of your organization's board or governing body. If your organization does not have a board or governing advisory body, select no to this question. And no further questions will then populate. I'll save a draft of this form. And I'll close it out. Great, so this brings me back to the application process page. I'll scroll down and quickly go through the last form on this page, the ACH payment request form. I'll click that blue open button and scroll down. So I now can see the ACH payment request form. This year, we're transitioning our reward disbursement to an ACH electronic payment system. Please complete this form with your organization's information, or if you're fiscally sponsored, your fiscal sponsor organization's appropriate bank account information. The first question on this form asks, is your organization fiscally sponsored by another organization with 501c3 status? If you are fiscally sponsored, select yes to this question. I'll scroll down here to show you the questions. We can then see there are fields asking you to fill out information on your fiscal sponsor's bank account information. If you're not fiscally sponsored, select no to this question. Then fill out your organization's bank account information. I'll take a second here to scroll down to the bottom of this form where we ask for you to provide an authorized financial contact. This should be a person who we can contact if we have any issues or questions around award disbursement. It might be the same person you list as the primary contact on the general information form, or for example, if you have a finance director and a grants writer, it might be that finance director at your organization. The primary contact will be contacted for all other questions regarding your application. This person will only be contacted regarding questions around disbursement. So I'll save a draft of this form. and I'll close it out. Now that we've gone through all 4 forms and we're back to the application process page, I'll just take a moment to mention that this blue action required text that is next to each form will change to green complete text after you have marked complete each of these 4 forms. You have the option to edit a form after you mark it complete. And once all 4 forms are marked complete, at the top of this application process page, the submit button will change to green. You'll then be able to press submit. I want to mention that once you press submit, you're no longer able to edit any of these forms. So please be sure to only press submit once all 4 forms are ready to go and be sent for review. And lastly, just mention the deadline, which is March 5th. At the top of the application process page, you'll see the number of days remaining for you to complete your application. I'll now stop my screen share and invite ArtsFund's Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Communications, Calandra Childers, on screen.
Thanks so much, Max, and thank you everybody who's been submitting your questions through the Zoom Q&A feature throughout the webinar. We are doing our very best to keep up with you. There's lots of stuff coming in. My name is Calandra Childers. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives here at ArtsFund, and we're so happy that so many of you have joined us today. I am a white woman with long curly brown hair and freckles, and I'm wearing a houndstooth sweater this morning because it is very dreary here in Seattle. So we are now going to move into our audience Q&A section. If we don't get to your question today, I just want to remind you that we do have an FAQ document. That document is actually posted to our website now in English. We are also having it translated into the following languages: Spanish, Mandarin, Russian, Vietnamese, French, Portuguese, Korean, and Tagalog. And those will all be posted to our website next week. We are going to do our best to get to everything today, but we will also have follow-up opportunities if we do not get to your question. With that, I will invite Michael and Ellen to be back on screen with us to start answering some of these questions. Excellent, thank you. All right, so the first question that we have here is, will I have to report that the funding was used in the way reported on the application? Will my organization be penalized if we use funding for a different area? Ellen, can I throw that one over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no reporting requirement for this grant. These grants are unrestricted, and recipient organizations should use the grant dollars as they see fit. Those questions we ask about how you anticipate using your funds are for research and advocacy purposes only.
Excellent, thank you. All right, our next question is, are there any restrictions on what funds can be spent on? Max, can I have you answer that one?
Sure. So these funds are unrestricted, but they cannot be used on personal expenses like home mortgages or utilities. They can also not be put towards services or assistance that require participation in any religious workshop, exercise, or instruction.
Right. This next question is about the award size. So there's a wide range of award amounts between $2,500 and $25,000, especially now that we aren't asking for a certain amount of funding. How will you determine who gets how much? Michael, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, this year, I think rather than having organizations request a certain amount of award, all applicants will automatically be considered for an award up to $25,000. And applicants will be scored based on a set of criteria determined by our community advisory panel. And those criteria are really designed to assess organizational health and prioritize funding for organizations that center Black, Indigenous people of color, LGBTQ+, people with disabilities, and rural populations. Our community advisory panel is made up of a really geographically and demographically diverse group of cultural and philanthropic leaders from across the entire state who we put together in order to keep decision making as close to the communities that we're trying to serve. So final awards will be based on those criteria, and they are going to continue to range between $2,500 and $25,000.
Great, thanks, Michael. All right, this one's pretty straightforward. When will funding decisions be made? Ellen?
Sure. Organizations will be notified by the end of May, and funds will be distributed by the end of June.
All right. And can applications be submitted in a language other than English? Max?
Yeah, so we're not able to accept applications in languages other than English, but we have translated the application materials, that's the application questions and the FAQ, into 7 additional languages and made those available on our website. This application is primarily quantitative. We mostly ask for numbers and responses to multiple choice questions. And where we do ask for brief narrative responses, those responses are not required and they're not scored.
All right. Last year, you funded all eligible applicants. Are you planning on doing that again this year? Michael, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, we did fund all eligible applicants in year 1, and we're really proud of that. And the hope is that the community advisory panel will allow us to do that again this year. However, without knowing the size and the scope of our applicant pool in advance, we can't guarantee that all eligible applicants will receive awards this year, but we will do our best.
All right. Next question is, my organization has cultural activities as a primary focus, but is not a 501c3. Are we eligible? Ellen, can you take that one?
Yeah. So the eligibility requirements do require that you are a 501c3 public charity or fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 public charity, or that you are a federally or state recognized tribal entity. So you must meet one of those 3 conditions. We aren't able to grant to for-profit organizations.
Great. Max, this is another one about eligibility. Is there a matching requirement for this grant?
So there is not a matching requirement for this grant. We are interested in learning more about how organizations anticipate being able to use this money to leverage more funding. And like I mentioned, there is a question about that in the application.
Great. Okay, Michael, I'm going to direct this one your way. Can you tell us what you mean by centering BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and people with disabilities?
Absolutely. And we touched on this a little bit, but our intention is really to reach organizations that prioritize these populations in their work, and they're actively trying to uplift these communities. And that means whether it's through their internal work or their external programming. And I just wanted to add on that for many arts and cultural organizations, it's easy to want to define this type of outreach through the programmatic output that the programmatic output that you do. But it is also important to remember that organizations that are focused on their internal decision making and their internal staff and board makeup would also be considered centering these populations. So ultimately, we're looking for you to define what centering means and to make a real honest evaluation of who you are and what you're trying to do in your communities.
All right. Max, another one for you. How do I apply as a fiscally sponsored organization?
So this year, we added a robust section of the FAQ with specific instructions for fiscally sponsored organizations. We encourage you to refer to this section before beginning your application. And if you have any questions, please reach out to our grant making team for additional support.
All right. Okay, well, that is all of the time that we have today for Q&As. Thank you all for submitting your questions. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Ellen, Max, and Michael, for addressing all of these issues. If you have any more questions at any time, but especially once you've begun the application, we really encourage you to reach out to our grant making team. You can reach us at accelerator@artsfund.org or by phone at 206-210-4670. We'll be available with you every step of the process. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Michael, to close us out.
All right. Well, again, I want to say thanks to Ellen and Max, Calandra, our ASL interpreters, and all of you for joining us today. And special thanks to Gabby and Annika for helping to moderate our incredibly active chat. So as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and we are going to make that recording available on our website as a resource as soon as possible. A professionally captioned recording with captions in 9 languages will be shared out early in February. And again, we are really excited to be administering this program again and to be building on the work of our 2023 pilot. And the point of this is to continue to provide essential capital to Washington's arts and culture sector. If you think you meet these eligibility requirements, please apply. And I'm going to say that again. If you think you meet these requirements, please apply. We want everyone to be applying to this program because we really want to make sure that the entire sector has the ability to benefit from this program. When you do close out of this Zoom, you will see a link to a feedback survey on today's website or on today's webinar. It's fully optional, but we are asking that you take the time to fill it out. We want to get better. We want to know what we did right. We want to know what we did wrong. And so please spend some time with this morning so we can improve in the future. So with that, I will just say thank you all for being here. It's great to administer this program again, and we look forward to your applications. Thank you and take care.